What if you had a child that you adopted from another country and your usual parenting techniques from those fancy books are not working and you're about to lose your child to the court system? That is my next guest on the Wounds of the Faithful podcast. We have Scotty Aemis today. You do not want to miss this episode.
Welcome to the Wounds of the Faithful podcast, brought to you by DSW Ministries. Your host is singer, songwriter, speaker, and domestic violence advocate Diana Winkler. She is passionate about helping survivors in the church heal from domestic violence and abuse and trauma. This podcast is not a substitute for professional counseling or qualified medical help. Now, here is Diana.
Hello, everybody. Welcome. I have Scott Aemis this week who reached out and he wanted to talk about healing childhood trauma. He adopted a couple kids from Russia, a Russian orphanage. And the last time that we had somebody on the show that also adopted children from a foreign country, that was Marcy Pusey. She was on episode 74 and 75. She was a great guest. She was a missionary in Germany and she adopted 4 kids. The typical parenting techniques were not working. The parenting advice she was getting did not meet the needs of her children. So I'm going to encourage you to listen to Marcy's episode along with this one, episode 74, and part 2 was episode 75. You will love her. So today we're going to talk about overseas adoption. We're going to talk about childhood trauma, healing, parenthood, counseling. Let me tell you more about my guest, Scotty Aemis. He is passionate about helping parents navigate childhood trauma. After he and his wife adopted 2 children, they found themselves learning everything they could about helping their children thrive. Everything that felt instinctively right was actually not helpful for children trying to heal from trauma. That set him on a journey to develop out his positive, safe relationships approach to parenting. He calls it PSR. It's helpful for all children and parents, but especially those navigating childhood trauma. And he calls himself the Child Trauma Sherpa. I like that. Most of the time when you hear the word or the title Sherpa, you think of those guides that help people to go hike up Everest to the top, which that kind of is fitting for going on this huge journey with your kids. And it's like climbing Everest when nothing's working and you're frustrated and you're tired and exhausted and you just want to help your kids. So we're going to hear his story and how he helped his children and how he is helping others. He almost lost his children in juvenile courtroom. And so that's when it ignited a determination to find a better way for his family. So I want to give Scotty the floor and tell you about his journey. So without further delay, here's Scotty Aemis. I'm so glad to have my guest today, Scotty Aemis. Thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks, Dan, and thanks for
Welcome. We were talking behind the scenes about other guests that have a similar story to you about adopting overseas and your ministry that you have in helping folks with children that have gone through childhood trauma. I see you call yourself a Child Trauma Sherpa. I love it.
As in, we're all walking a journey together. I'm not pointing the direction or telling people what to do, but once you're on the journey, you're on the journey forever. So I like to walk next beside people and just share experiences and share what we've done to have so far a healing experience for our kids.
So you've adopted 2 kids from Russia. Now, can you tell us what led up to you choosing this path of parenthood? What's your background here?
Sure. Pretty traditional background from the Northeast up in the Philadelphia area, and worked hard. And my wife and I decided we felt at the time that it was kind of our calling. We thought there was so much challenges going on in the world and difficulties for kids. We thought this was an important step for us. And so we went down this journey, and we probably thought maybe this is a shared vision for many parents who've gone through this process. We thought everything was just going to be sweet and wonderful. You go and connect and come home, and everybody lives very happily ever after, and everything is perfect, and there's no challenges left in the world. So that's the first mistake we made. We're not really understanding and not being taught what trauma was, not really understanding that just because we love our kids, that is going to be enough.
Yeah.
And the people who are involved in this process, whether it's adoption, really, I talk about any kind of child trauma, but my personal experiences with our kid is that nobody was trained, informed, or given suggestions about this, that this is a real, actually a real brain injury,
Mhm.
and that it needs to be healed. And so just like anything else, just like a broken arm. I mean, you can't just force the correction. One of the things I often tell people, they use as analogies, if you broke your arm, you wouldn't tell the person to go run around the next day and throw a ball. You have to put a cast around, what we do, what we talk and training the parents we work with is we're really going to be putting the cast around your kids for, could be years and years and years. And that's just what we're signing on to. That's what we're doing God's work for. And you can interrupt anytime, because give a little bit of our story. We didn't really understand what we got ourselves into, because when we came home, again, we thought just us being good parents, us showing love was going to be enough. But then a lot of the difficulty kicked in, the behavior issues, and and our natural reaction to what we're taught in our society is, all right, well, we have to show some discipline.
Right.
Our children have to obey. And we found over and over again is that it was a cycle of actually making everything worse. And then you get into this never ending process of pushing an authoritative process and having more rejection. And as the kids get older, it gets worse and worse. And our revelation really didn't happen until we were sitting in child court and judges were getting very close to taking our kids away from us.
Mm.
It's at that moment that I decided, this can't be. This was 6 years into our process. I just said, this can't be what our life is going to be about, having our kids taken away because we couldn't handle them, because we didn't do anything for them. And so at that point, I decided that something has to change. It was one of those moments that you just decide, got to find something. And by chance, literally the next day, I ran into a pastor's wife, who was also a therapist for children and children with trauma. And she began to explain it to me. And it all of a sudden opened the doors of understanding. It was like, oh, is this right? And so obviously I didn't just work on the conversation. We went back and started reading books by neuroscientists and in the right schools, finding groups everywhere we could. And over the years, we implemented what I call now the positive safe relationship process. Slowly over time, a revelation, our kids are doing great. They're doing well. They couldn't make it in public school. Now they're back in public school. They're finished up 12th grade this year. And I wanted to be able to share some of that with your listener to say, there is hope. And if we provide a little grace and listen a little hope and understand a little science, God has given us all the tools we need to help our kids heal. And it's a wonderful thing if you're willing to go down that path. It's not easy, but it will work.
I really like you giving us the happy ending first, because I've heard about kids in orphanages and they suffer some really horrible things. What was it like, if we can circle back to, what was it like when you visited the orphanage? What kind of things were they facing? Are you able to share that?
Sure, I'll share a little bit of it. And our kids were from Russia. So whatever anybody's heard, you can multiply that by about 10, as bad as it is. Because Russia was probably one of the coldest places. Many places in South America, some of the nuns might be taking care of the kids, or they have some families taking care of it. Here is just a a cold stone floor kind of room or house, and they're all in together. They don't really learn much. It's really more of a, how do we keep the kids from acting out and having their problems and things like that, and how do we keep them healthy and the whole process. So in our kids' case, they were both there for about a year and a half, which is a lot. But they came home to us at 3 and 2. So basically they were there for 1.5, and the 3 and 6, 9 months old till 2 and a little bit. And so that was a long time in their life, and they didn't really understand. And one of the things what we tell about, and I think I might refer to this at the beginning, is that one of the things that we really learned is that this isn't just a situation that can change. It's actually a brain injury. That the way our brain works is that when we're in a situation of fear, everybody's always heard that the fear or flight mechanism. That's because our brains are working in the reptilian brain. And so when we're in a scary situation, where do we go? Do we fight or take a flight? With childhood trauma, what it does is it configures the brain so everything goes to the amygdala, and everything is a reaction. Everything is an emotion, because the bond of trust and of safety has been broken. And you just don't repair that by having somebody new come in and saying, okay, everything's good now. Instinctively, these kids have lost the trust and the belief that they'll be safe, that they'll be okay, and that they'll be loved. And that's what needs mending over time. And then over time, if you can create the right environment for them, and this is what I go into in my book, and the right environment for them, they can slowly heal over time, where, again, when a thought or a situation comes into the brain, they can forward over the prefrontal cortex, which is what we talk about in terms of reasoning and thought process and making thoughtful decisions and things like that, as opposed to emotional decisions. And that's really the crux of the situation. The beauty of it, especially with kids, is that the brain is so malleable, well into the 20s, and now research has shown even beyond, is that the brain can reconfigure again. It can go back to a normal state. They can learn to process things normally and through the prefrontal cortex and make good decisions in life.
Wow. I read on your website that there was some autism spectrum. Is that right?
What happens is a lot of kids who have trauma are diagnosed with autism. My kids happen not to have autism,
Oh, that's good.
being on the spectrum, but because that is such a popular diagnosis, and the one that the schools and very much of our system is built around diagnosing and providing counseling for, that it's almost automatic. Problem is, it's the exact opposite of what kids with trauma need, because the kids on the spectrum, they need a certain sense of right or wrong, different decisions, consequences, so they can learn how to learn that process. Kids with trauma don't need that. They need relationships. And so every time you try to give a consequence, it's the child is going to reject it, because they're going to say, that's just another way of enforcing power over me. I don't trust you. And until you can develop that trust again, one should really add in all the consequences, all the discipline, all the right and wrongs and penalties and advancements for the kids. You have to work on relationships. One of the things we talk about with kids with trauma is the 3 R's, and past guests may have talked about that. So when a kid is in that state of the emotional dysregulation, again, our natural reaction is, well, we want to tell them what to do. We want to tell them to act right next time. But when you're in that fear or flight mode, you can't hear reason. You can't learn. You're, again, all fired up because what's going to happen? I don't trust this person. I'm fearing for my safety right now. And so the 3 R's are: first, regulate. Whatever you do, you have to get the kids to calm, under control, have a process. And then once they're calm and regulated, then the next step is to move into relationship. They have to know that they can trust you, that they want to have relationships. And then only after those 2 steps, you move into the reason. And they think, hey, what could you have done better? Or what could you have done differently? How could we have solved that? That same thing came up before. And through that process, they can over time learn, and they'll fail and they learn, and fail and they'll learn. And eventually over time, they'll begin to get it. They'll have their coping skills that when they're upset, and they'll begin to build some resiliency. And on their own, they'll be able to move from a fear of flight mode right into calming themselves down and thinking the issues through, what they need to do. So that's a lot of what we teach.
That's a great alternative to what I've heard in the past of how to do those 3 R's rather than just the discipline part. Would you be willing to give an example of one of your kids, a situation that you applied those principles? What does it actually look like in like
Sure.
a practical sense?
So I'll give you a couple examples. First of all, and a lot of your listeners will probably be able to share in this. One of the biggest mistakes we ever did was in school, elementary school, because things that are the least safe for these kids.
Yeah.
They have to get on a bus with 20 other wild kids who are just wondering what's going on. Then they have to wait in an auditorium until their classroom is ready. They have to if they walk in line, they have to be in a classroom with all these kids and going on, and the teacher, they're not used to it. They have to go to a lunchroom. They go through the play area or recess. All these things are unstructured. They feel very unsafe in those situations. Then they react negatively. And what do the teachers of the schools do? They want to punish them. They want to set them aside. And by the way, what we do at home, that kid all of a sudden doesn't feel safe for something, and all of a sudden wants to throw something, wants to talk back. Look, some of our kids and your parents will be there. Sometimes they can be quite abusive to us as parents, or they'll throw things in the room when they don't get their way. Or many times for my son, we had an issue with taking showers. All boys are like that to some extent.
Yeah.
But what level does it get to? And so do you tell them, do I enforce the decision? What do you have to do this? Or do we work with them, calm them down, tell them what's going on, ask them some questions in terms of, do you like showers? Why do they like showers? And just have a conversation to build this relationship. And then you provide them the opportunity to make a decision. You give them alternatives. And again, this is the structure that parents use anyway, but especially works with kids. You give them 2 or 3 alternatives that you're okay with any one of them. And then they get to pick. And also they get to feel that, oh, wow, I have some control over my life. I get to decide. And in in my son's case, and doesn't always work every time, but it work over time, he was all of a sudden able to make a decision on his own. I never had him having another conversation with him again about showers, because he got to make the decision. He got to be involved, and he trusted me. And he felt like I trusted him, and he trusted me to make that decision with him. So that might be an example. Another example is sometimes over meals or getting ready for meals or cooking, they have a common, well, our natural reaction. We're working all day. We're tired. Now we've got to make meals. And end of the day, and now they're acting up. Now they're being very annoying. And I just want to yell when they're not helping. I just want them to sit at the table or get some milk out. No one throw something on the floor. Your natural reaction is to say, I want to yell at this kid and tell him what to do. But actually, the way to do it is turn off the oven, turn off the stove, come sit down on the couch, calm down. Again, remember, time in is not time outs. Right? Never isolate a child with trauma. Always have to be a child. It has to be with others, because all healing is done within relationship. Sounds a lot like Jesus and God, doesn't it? Everything's
Yeah.
relationship.
Amen.
And if you can model that, then all of a sudden it works. And then you're seeing it. And then you go back and ask, after everything's, okay, what can you do differently? Let's go do it together now. Instead of saying that, directing them to do a chore, how about we do this chore together? And then maybe we'll get some ice cream or get a snack or something like that. And all of a sudden, calm, they're happy, and they're ready to move on. Again, it doesn't work every time, but it works a lot. And over time, it'll work every time. That's one of the process. I often say one of the things is authority versus authoritarianism. Kids want to be disciplined. Discipline, by definition, means teaching. It doesn't mean penalties if you use the word discipline properly. But they'll give you authority over them because they trust you and they love you and they need to work for it. But if you're an authoritarian, it's a power move. And it doesn't provide trust. It doesn't provide love. It provides you forcing them to do something differently. And we always say is build the authority, because the authority will be given to you to take care of your kids, and they'll give it to you openly after they learn to trust and love you.
Exactly. It sounds like, when you pointed out Jesus, it sounds like the discipline is on us as parents to take time with your child. We're hungry, we're tired. You hit the nail on the head. We just want to get the meal on the table and go and sit down and relax. And we have to put our desires aside and sit and take time with the child and talk in calmly and find out what the issue is, and then go back to what we were doing before. That must be time consuming and
It's
takes a
time
lot
consuming.
of patience. Yeah.
Yes. But you know what? When we look at Jesus as modeling for us, it's not to have anything differently. Not one of us is perfect. And the patience is you stay in the game. Over time, you're loved unconditionally. And you'll make mistakes and you can't your way. But over time, if you follow the way, things will get easier. You'll understand how to put things in the right priorities and be okay with it. One of the lines that we use oftentimes for parents is that, and this is hard, but this is going right back from Jesus again. The value of your love is not dependent on your child's response.
Ooh.
The value of your love is not dependent on your child's response. So we want to be loved back. And when we're loving our kids, we want that feedback. Oh, thank you. Oh, you're the best. You're the greatest. With kids with child trauma, they're unable to do that, especially at the beginning of the healing process. But guess what? If Jesus put us on the same level that we want to put our kids on, none of us would make it either. And he loves us just as much, no matter what, no matter how we behave. And we know we fail every day, but he's still there. He's still loving us.
Now, did your kids go through any formal counseling?
I call this chapter on women in quicksand. Because before we really learned about trauma, we got all kinds of counselors. And every counselor is a professional, is educated, and knows what they're talking about for their profession. And they'll tell you what you should do. And only after the fact, I realized that we were told 4 different counselors to do 4 different things and got nowhere because we're going in 4 different directions, which means we didn't go anywhere. And I think there's a lot of parents that are in that same situation. And then only after we learned about trauma, did we say, okay, from now on, we're in charge, the counselors on. Because our natural reaction is we want to defer to our counselors. We want to defer to the schools, getting an IEP and learning the process and what's the issue. And so therefore, we're deferring to everybody and realizing there's no benefit. And what our natural reaction is, these guys are professionals, so it must be the problem either with the kid. These are us. They're schooled, they have their masters, they must know what they're doing. But our child is not improving. It must be our child. It's not. Because they're being told 4 different things by 4 different counselors. So once we learn that about really understanding trauma is the core to everything else for our kids, that every therapist had to have trauma training, had to be specifically expertise in trauma. And that began to change everything for them as well. And so when we had the mobile therapist or the TSS, and a lot of your listeners know all these terms, as long as they understood what trauma was and what the principles of healing from trauma were, they were allowed in our house and they were allowed to talk to our kids. And if not, we would just ask for different ones. And we'd rather have none than the wrong ones. That was another thing that we learned over time. Even though these are good people, you know, that old saying about when you're a hammer, everything's like a nail. When a therapist who deals with behavior modification, everything looks like a behavior. In this case, everything is the relationship. That's the process. Once we've done the road, all of a sudden the healing kicked in. All of a sudden the safety kicked in, and the improvement. And we could see advancements year after year after year. So it was a big change. I wear a vest called Lakeside. We're lucky enough in our Philadelphia area to have a school that is specifically for trauma. And when my son went from public school to this school, again, everything changed because they knew how to treat kids with trauma. Smaller classrooms, a hello, a name every single day as they come into school, even a touch on the shoulder. There would be no homework. Everything is done at the classroom. When they act out, they have some called a resolve room, so they don't have to be sent down to the principal's office for penalties. Instead, they go to a room where they can get regulated. When they're regulated, go back to the classroom because they knew that if you want to teach your kids learn, you have to be regulated. Kids can't learn when they're dysregulated. It sounds simple, and it's easier to say than to do. And the school is all built on a gentleman named Bruce Perry. He's the neuroscientist that we work with. Some of your listeners may have heard he's finished a book a couple of years ago with Oprah on trauma, and his whole bit is on brain-based therapy. And we believe that working through the brain will solve all the problems. And all brain-based therapy is improved through relationships. So that's what we've been taught.
I don't know how I missed that you guys are in Philadelphia.
We're in Indy. We're very close.
You're in Ambler. I know where that's at. I was like, okay, where is this fabulous school at? That is incredible. How long has it been there?
They see the sports, the school district, there's 4 schools, and they work with all the school districts in our area, up to about 30 or 40 school districts. And those school districts will send kids that can't cope with that school to Lakeside. In addition, they have trainings for all over the country and actually all over the world now, in terms of trying to teach teachers and other healthcare professionals all about the science of trauma. But yeah, it's right in Horsham and up in Southampton, if you know those areas. I mean, we're getting a little, most of your audience, I'm sure, don't know in any city, so, but they're all in suburban Philadelphia. And what's amazing is it's probably at this point the largest trauma school in the country, specifically for trauma. And you would be amazed every year to see how these kids are transformed from the time they come in to the time they're ready to graduate. And it's just amazing. They come in sure that the world's terrible, that they have no place in it, they have no hope. And by the time they're done, they see a future because they're in control. They can they can take on their life mission and their projects and whatnot. So it's been a great experience, and it's a great school.
Now you say graduate. Is it through high school?
Yeah, they have programs as early as 5th grade, right through 12th.
Great.
And it's just a process. I wish every district had this, because a lot of our kids, one of the worst things that for kids with trauma, public schools are just very difficult because it's, it has to be their way. They have a system. You have to fit into the system. But it's not based on relationship. It's based on, the old cultural system from the 1800s. You have to sit down, open a book, start being taught. And it's not right. It's not what a lot of our kids need. So therefore, a lot of parents end up going into homeschool, and homeschool is a lot better for them, but it's a lot harder on parents, right? Because somebody has to be home, they have to go through the process. You don't necessarily just want to sit plop a kid down on a computer, and they're off doing their own thing. So it needs a lot of involvement, and it's a very difficult situation for kids with trauma. But there's hope. If anybody has any questions, reach out to me, reach out to Lakeside. We'd love to help any way we can. They have courses and for people as well.
Oh, so do you have anything like, if you're not in the Philadelphia area, do you have any programs that are virtual?
Yes, so there's some virtual programs on the site, as well as if they have trainings with teachers. So if your children are actually in the school and want to look for trauma training, they actually do that either in groups or one by one. There's virtual training on the website that they can work on. And there's also healthcare professionals. I mean, people that are working in the Department of Health, for example. We train, 50,000 healthcare professionals in Pennsylvania on the elements of training of trauma. So it's something that can, if any of your parents that want to reach out, like I said, there's opportunities, and whether it's us or whether another group, we're willing to help any way we can.
We are going to stop here with our conversation. I think it's a good spot to stop and continue our conversation. The next episode of the Wounds of the Faithful podcast, we'll find more information about helping children to heal from all kinds of trauma. And where are Scotty's kids today? What are they doing nowadays? And how can you get help for your child? You need some support, some resources. So Please come back and join us next time on the Wounds of the Faithful podcast. God bless you, and we'll see you soon. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to the Wounds of the Faithful podcast. If this episode has been helpful to you, please hit the subscribe button and tell a friend. You can connect with us at dswministries.org, where you'll find our blog along with our Facebook, Twitter, and our YouTube channel links. Hope to see you next week.